Hello and welcome to the program. This is the Ecomodernist channel live. I'm Carl Pauls. I'm here with Gabriel Ignetti and Chris Bergen. Our special guest is Enrique Lescure, who has previously led the Earth Organization for Sustainability. Enrique studied political science in Sweden and has been an EOS board member for many years. So if you would, explain what is the Earth Organization for Sustainability?
To explain that, we have to explain something that we call the three criteria. And the three criteria are that we have a global ecological budget ceiling, so a limit on how much resources we are allowed to take out from the planet every year. We have a green budget, let's say. The second thing is a circular economy. And the third is a global income floor to ensure that not everyone has, people won't have exactly the same income, but everyone would have an income so that no one would need to live in destitution. And that is because with a global ecological budget ceiling, that we limit how much we can take out from the planet, it won't be fair if some people don't get anything at all.
And so through the global budget ceiling and the fair apportionment of resources and productivity, the idea, from what I gather from your website, is ending competition for these resources. And you have several projects that you propose to achieve that. Why don't we get into the circular economy and how we can achieve that and meet this ecological budget ceiling?
Well, actually, the circular economy stuff is the stuff that we have most in common with other environmental organizations. And that is basically that we recycle everything, but not only that we recycle, recycling is only at the absolute end because you can never get 100% resource transfer. A lot of that is going to be converted into energy and be unusable after the conversion, and a lot of it is going to become trash. So instead, what we want to do is to follow each product from extraction and assembly through the entire phase of its usage, and then reuse, recycle, and so on. And we envision it very much like modularization, that things get standardized. So you, instead of having to scrap your entire cell phone when the camera breaks down, you can replace the old camera with a new camera, which hardware-wise looks exactly the same as the new camera, so you can fit stuff into the cell phone without scrapping the entire cell phone. And today we have these planned obsolescence aspects. New parts look slightly different, more or less fancier, and you can't really fit them into, you have to buy a new cell phone anyway, and the old cell phone gets on the trash heap in the Philippines.
What kinds of actions can sort of our listeners and viewers participate in to sort of resist this design planned obsolescence? Are there other movements? You mentioned that this circular economy was something you held in common with other environmental organizations. Is it reduced to environmental orgs, or are there other organizations we might branch out and find allies in?
This has extremely little to do with the US, but you could look locally, often through your Facebook accounts and similar, of the farmers market, of pawn shops, second-hand stores, etc. Those things exist, and you can also look for like environmental and green festivals. Often here, elder people are engaging with it, and it could be a good way to reach out and meet your local communities. So we would always advocate that. But in terms of the US, we are less focused on what the individual could do, and we are more focused on how to design our future so that we would change our incentives for everything.
What is this design for the future? Is this the resource management part of the projects or something else?
Our main idea is to create a new currency, and this is going to be a moneyless currency. So how can a currency be moneyless? It lacks two functionalities that money has, because money is possible to save over permanent duration of time. It could lose its value, and it does under the modern industrial side with inflation, but it is going to last. And the second aspect is that $1 could be traded an indefinite amount of times. Energy credits are, as you hear from the name, based on the total energy production capacity, the exergy of the system. So we take the total exergy of a closed system and we divide it out between all the users based on, for example, their work output, the time they put in the work, and how popular the products that their businesses are producing are. And in that case, we are distributing energy credits. You can only use energy credits once. When they are used once, they're converted into information. So you allocate your energy credits if you want a pair of new sneakers. The new sneakers are produced, and when you have allocated your energy credits, they are converted into specific information, a specific line of code, which says that these sneakers should be produced and they should go to you. So basically, you cannot use the same production capacity twice. For example, if you're going to work for 8 hours and you need, let's say, 1 cup of coffee and one lunch to work for 8 hours, you cannot work for 16 hours on that unless you want to break yourself. So that is what the energy credits are measuring. And the second thing is that energy credits can only last for, let's say, a period of 2 years. It's not important it's 2 years. It can be 1 year, it can be 1 month. But if it's 1 month, we have to distribute them out quicker and similar and make the measurement again and again, because the measurement is about our ecological budget, and that needs to be adjusted as well. For example, if we get a volcano eruption, we may need to reduce the environmental budget, and if we get positive effect, for example, that topsoils get wider because we allow the earth to recover, we could get a bigger ecological budget. So it's not a degrowth system, it's a system where growth is incidental to the environment, and the environment is first, because we have one bank and the bank is our planet. And that doesn't sound romantic, but we all are dependents on the planet.
And so to contrast EOS projects with a degrowth movement or a green growth or any other sort of, as you call it, the system which demands infinite growth. This is somewhere in between. Is it based on the flourishing of humankind without necessarily maximizing profits?
Exactly, because our main goal is the highest standard of living for the longest time possible, for the biggest possible amount of people. So we are basically approaching this as if the Earth was an alien planet, and we are coming in from the outside and see how should we be able to manage resources on this world in such a manner that humanity could prosper for the longest time possible. So that's our way of thinking.
Great. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for speaking with us. I do like a lot of what I'm hearing already. You mentioned a global budget for resources. This would be different. I think some people maybe more familiar with what they've called a carbon budget. We can only have so much carbon dioxide emissions before we which I have problems with the carbon budget, but your budget of resources sounds interesting, and if I understand you, I agree with it completely. Could you expound a bit on the difference between those?
We are, for example, with an energy credit system, we are measuring the cost of every project according to the factor known as emergy, and emergy is the cost of performing an act of labor with energy. Energy is the currency of the universe. You cannot do anything without energy. So how you go on for it? Let's say that you want to produce a car. Well, what we are measuring then is the extraction cost for the raw materials, the refining process of the raw materials, the assembly and the transport of the vehicle. And then we also measure the fuel, and that is separate. The extraction, refining, and the environmental cost of restoring the damage made by the fuel. So under an energy accounting system, we would have the effect that the more environmentally damaging an action is or a process is, the more it is going to cost. So that would create an incentive towards greener consumption automatically with the system. I hope that has explained the question.
Yeah, I think it helps.
My next question is along the lines of what about existing existing circular economies? Like you mentioned the really great aspects of being able to trade your possessions with another person, to go to secondhand stores, go to buy nothing groups, which would be truly, moneyless and not exchanging money or currency, just giving items to people who need them. Uh, is the total future vision inclusive of free flowing possessions, where if I don't need something, I will give it up, and then someone else will find use for it, and in that way, the human beings would live in a system of plentiful resources under this budget, or would you think there would be a barter system underlying that?
Regarding this, I do not think too much about that because I do not think that the energy accounting system is going to govern people's lives. I'm just thinking that it is going to be the system that manages production and ensures that we have a sustainable future. Regarding a second-hand economy, like for example, if you want to if you think that your lawnmower takes too much place, you are free to put it in a pawn shop. And I can think that for the second-hand economy, there could even be alternative currencies which people trade and barter with, and that is not a problem because we are not against markets. What we are against is basically destroying the foundation for our common future for the sake of profit. So that's the big stuff. We are also not against private property, so people will still own their houses, people will still own their businesses, and so on. But the entire system of managing, let's say, production and trade and everything is going to change. And if your business is doing stuff that is damaging or bad, it is going to be affected badly and it's probably going to go bust. But it's the same thing with today's system, and it's the same thing with political decisions that are made today.
So let's talk a little more about this transition plan for moving from our current money-based system into this non-monetary currency, the energy credit system. What's the plan, and how? What are the other missing parts we haven't talked about? How money, how society functions without money?
Um, I will, I will answer your second question first. The missing part is about the amount of production, for example, because one thing that won't exist in this society is an incentive to produce as much as possible. Because let's face it, if you have a company that produces a product, let's say bicycles under this system, and the energy accounting system, uh, you are not going to get profits per bicycles you own because it's a profitless system. What you are going to get if you are producing bicycles which data shows that the people are satisfied with and which are environmentally friendly, so they are cheaper and similar, you're going to get a higher income with energy credits for the next cycle. So basically, you even if you are a business owner, you are very much earning a wage, just like the people who are a part of your business. And the energy accounting system is going to basically produce and distribute all of these energy credits to a computerized process. So you won't need to worry about not having enough to sustain your workers, because as long as your business is doing a good work, you are going to get uh, enough to sustain all of you. The second aspect is, without advertisement, it is estimated that between 50 and 70% of the production of items will be reduced, and that would mean less labor time for people. And that would mean that we could both offload people who are working with absolutely socially necessary work, like, for example, cleaning, like let's say taking care of the elderly, taking care of small children and similar, which is a big thing here in Sweden, where we have a socialized daycare system and everything. And that would mean more people who are working with that, and more people who are working less time with that. So people will get more free time, basically, because there will be no need. Also, there is some work that is going to disappear entirely, gratefully so. Like, for example, uh, casino activities are probably going to be reduced quite a lot, which is going to be really socially good, because casinos are doing a lot of damage for society and are destroying families and ripping up communities and similar, where they are 90% of 90% of the profits of casinos are yielded from people who have addictions for gambling, and it breaks families and everything. So uh, and
I,
your second question,
okay,
excuse me,
go ahead.
the second question is the transition plan. Or wait, I will let you ask your question first. Then I could keep the transition plan inside here, and I can return to it later.
It is sort of related to that, and that is without market financialization, without investment driving production, uh, what's the plan for growing access to human needs in the developing parts of the world? Is there some kind of managed plan to roll out increased technologies and access? Is there extra, like, would you get more energy credit bonus for doing that expansion work in places where it's genuinely needed? Uh, Explain to me sort of the difference between a financialized system and the managed system.
Uh, well, financialized systems are managed to extent. They are hybrid managed and hybrid profit driven, and they are always doing a balancing act. In this system, the energy credit system, we would have one institution that creates and distributes energy credits. That would be a technate. And the technate could have, let's say, not a centralized committee, but steering committees and similar, and also membranes that are working together with public authorities. And then we could, for example, like the European Union, have target one areas where we create incentives for people who want to improve infrastructure in the developing world and help to develop the infrastructure there so it would become far better and far more adapted. In the same time, we need to engage those people who are living there locally, because I have some examples of, for example, the Swedish aid agency planting seeds in Tanzania, which did not at all work there. So we need to collaborate with the local people. And it's interesting that you asked this question, because I have written an article on this theme, which also touches the issue of transition. And let's talk about the transition plan, because we are not a political party. We do not intend to win elections. We do not intend to take power through other means. What we are intending to do is to test this system. We want to test it first to see how does it affect incentives? How does it affect social cohesion? How does it affect human well-being? So our idea is to test it partially inside a network of communities, and these could be neighborhoods, these could be factories, these could be similar, and then we're just focusing on a number of key resources and then see how does it fares and similar. But the issue is that we do not have enough time right now. I expect most data shows that Europe is actually going to very likely become colder because of the cold spot in the North Atlantic, the only spot that is getting cooler in the entire world, which is because of melting sea ice that puts fresh water out in the ocean, which slows down the circular systems of let's say, sea currents. English is my second language, so, but men, jag ska inte prata om svenska. So let's say, I have written an article recently, which is very short, and it's exploring an idea that maybe we could use energy credits as a system of tracking aid through the UN to refugee communities worldwide, because we have 122.6 million displaced persons in the world. And the problem is that a lot of aid is skimmed away. There's a lot of corruption, and for example, warlords, organized criminal networks, and even local corrupt politicians are skimming off a lot of the aid, taking aid and selling it and similar. The positive thing with the energy credits is that they cannot be used for corruption in that manner, because they can only be used once. So, and I think actually the resistance against that within the UN will be pretty low. So that's my take on it. But the transition plan is something we have to focus on more.
You mentioned the technate, and this is the committee or the organization in charge of distributing energy credits and marshaling resources. We got in our reading the your aim is to create a proto-technate. Is this the precursor system, and what's the next step to forming this outside of what you mentioned, trialing the technical aspects of the systems? What's the organizational goal?
The organizational goal, let's say the first step could be doing this testing, the proto-technique in the local level. And The second step could be to, for example, do this institutionally. For example, creating energy credit systems for, as I said earlier, refugees or for communities. And the fourth step would be to uh, basically introduce this kind of system for fossil fuels. So I believe that fossil fuels would need to be withdrawn from the market, and that we need a system to offset the profits so that everything goes back into restoring and mitigating the crisis created by that resource. So, and the next step could be to gradually move over more and more resources to that. So basically, we decide that the main problem with the current system is that it counts the planet as externalities, and we want to internalize the externalities and make them a part of the economy in the central aspects. We want to integrate the entire economy and the understanding of the economy.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, do you have ideas about where would be an ideal place to start with testing these ideas? Are you thinking about a small country in Latin America or Africa or a Pacific Island or a district in Europe? Where do you think you might, or what attributes are you looking for the place where you want to start and make these changes to see if they work?
Let's say that what we have thought about is an area in northern Sweden where we want to test it in terms of electric consumption. So we are thinking about a community that produces its own energy. And then the people who are living there are not paying energy bills. They are basically instead contributing a minimum amount to the community every month, and then they are free to work outside in the wider system. And then we are thinking to maybe include food there so that we have like agricultural units that produce things and similar and build up a network in that way. But the problem is that it is going to take a lot of times, if not a lot of groups are pooling their resources together. And let's face it, most people in the developing world won't do that. So the next step would be to test aspects of this to help people who have it really tough, like refugees, like I said before. And then the next step after that would be to begin using aspects of this for certain key resources, like, for example, oil, and then gradually, in that manner, help to phase out oil.
It's a little bit like some aspects of a cooperative organization.
We did gloss over this. You mentioned there's an EOS movement in the US. Tell us about the various activities of the EOS movement and different projects going on here.
I could begin with the US movement in Sweden. What we have been doing is that we have locally we have built a biodome for a group of urban gardeners. We have designed a concept for modular housing to change the ways cities are designed in the future, so that in the circular economy term, that instead of building a house once and only focusing on the house standing there, we can turn a multi-family house into like 500 one-family houses and then into a multi-family house again. And we can also move housing when people move, and then connect them to the grid by even having the grid modularized or having certain like plumbing and electricity outlets on the houses that could be moved between different parts of the house, since the entire house is modular. Think Lego. Then we have another project which we are seeking funding for currently, which is called Climatopia, which is a civilization-style strategy game, which is about the climate change. We have an alpha out there at Tis2 Games. The code word is Planet, and everyone are free to play it. It's not very great. It's quite addictive, but we are seeking funding for a full-style civilization-style game for it. As for the EOS in the United States, they are doing stuff that is much cooler than what we are doing in Sweden. They are working with building up a database for the global resource budget. So a sort of Google for resources where you can, for example, see where all the steel is collected, for what it is assembled for, and how much steel we currently have available on the planet, and how much is used in the economic system. So that is what they have been working on.
I'm interested in this game. I used to be in the games industry. You said it was Clean Utopia? And
Climatopia.
oh,
So
clean.
climate and topia. And I could share the link here.
Yes, in the chat,
Please.
I'll be able to get it.
Yeah, yes, I could share the link because the EU has been funding a game with the same name, so we have to change the name of the game, which is another issue entirely. But the EU's game they are funding about is for smaller children, and they have some sort of fairy island which kids are going to save, and we are instead focusing on that you are running the UN basically, but with more power, and you are going to try to stop the worst effects of climate change, and you can develop technology, install reforms, and you can install bad reforms that make things even worse. So there will be like 200 ways to destroy the world in that game.
Young children, teenagers, when is it a good time to get them thinking about the big picture and putting all these pieces together that they learn a little here, a little there, so that they are
I
not
would
easily
say,
swayed by other
I would
people.
say for the absolute majority between the ages of 11 to 15. That is my experience as a substitute teacher.
Okay.
Because smaller children are navigating very much the interpersonal world. So they are very much preoccupied with things that how should I be a good friend? How should I be a good sibling? How should I be a good person? And of course they are going to learn things about society, and they are going to learn things about the environment, about animals and so on, but and some things about climate. But for the climate issue, I would start introducing it at ages 10 to 11. And then some children are precocious, so they are going to be interested in other stuff. So, for example, I have used gamification to teach children how to uh, how resources are managed and similar, and what doesn't work. Like, for example, when I set a group of 11 graders to play the game The Eternal Paperclip when we had some minutes over on a math lesson. So I set them to play The Eternal Paperclip, if you have heard about it. It is a game where you play as a deranged AI that only wants to produce paperclips and maximize the production of paperclips. And actually, there was one boy who won the game and turned all matter in the entire universe into paperclips. And he told me that it was entirely absurd and that it was basically showing why uh, exponential growth for exponential growth's sake doesn't work. I was impressed by that.
Wonderful. And finally, the EOS movement in the United States.
They are based in Washington, so it's Cascadia.
Mhm.
And I would advocate everyone who want to try to help, because even let's say that the US seems a bit radical in comparison to, for example, most of the ecomodernists. We have ecomodernists here in Sweden as well. And what I would say is that we have a plan A, and that plan A is green growth, and that a green market economy will innovate away the need for a fossil economy, and that will save the planet. I happen to believe that that is a very optimistic take, but I would love to be wrong, because if I am right, it means that we have some problems that we need to solve together. But I think that we need a plan B and a plan C as well, and that is the responsible stuff to think about, and to not be afraid of what, let's say, the oligarchs are thinking, because the oligarchs used to substitute clues with money, and colonizing Mars or blotting out the sun or similar solutions are not going to work for mankind.
Yeah, we certainly don't shy away from the market independent or the politically independent thoughts of eco-modernists. There are many, many eco-modernists who are market driven, but we try to keep it fairly open to alternatives here. The plan A as green growth, we are definitely allies there, of course. We think that having clean energy that phases out fossil fuels and promotes growth in the developing world is absolutely critical. So we're with you on that.
Uh, the problem is that green growth has not phased out fossil fuels. We can still see that they are prospecting for new oil fields in the sea outside of Pakistan, and they are prospecting in Greenland as well, which is an absolute disaster, both not at least morally, because Greenland is becoming accessible because of climate change, to the detriment, I would say, for most people who live in coastal communities worldwide. So
Yeah.
so my take there is that if solar energy, which is making impressive strides, was phasing out fossil fuels, most oil companies would be phased out as well, or would start making solar panels.
And of course, our position generally as eco-modernists would be that the problem is that green growth excludes certain clean energy technologies like nuclear energy, and so we are hamstrung by the fossil fuel companies intentionally, and intentionally there is examples of fossil fuel companies opposing nuclear because nuclear is that very powerful, very low input technology, which can destroy baseload fossil fuel technologies like coal and provide dispatchable energy that fills in the gaps in solar and wind.
I'm interested in that because about 50% of fossil fuel usage worldwide, if we say 50 to 70%, is, and now I'm not counting with fertilizers and similar, which are made from byproducts from oils and similar. I am counting with what is used for fuel. Uh, Heating, I can see nuclear, solar, wind, tidal, hydroelectric move out. In fact, Sweden is 98% renewable in terms of our energy usage. But we have most of our traffic is based on fossil or hybrid cars. And the interesting thing is that hybrid cars are actually increasing the exploitation of oil resources, because it's making previously non-profitable deposits profitable.
Chris, go ahead.
Two very brief comments. One, my personal small little wrench I'll throw into some of this is that about a decade ago, I realized that we have a hybrid energy grid. I know I've said this on a few other episodes. We have solar and wind, other renewables on one side operating to make electricity and power. And then we have mostly natural gas on the other side, and they work together. They're working together as a hybrid energy source on the grid. So I feel that renewables are tied in with fossil fuels, especially natural gas, for their primary backup. Even though batteries have gotten better, it's better, a little better, and still primarily fossil fuels. The other thing is that there's an organization or a group of people who have signed a pro-nuclear statement, and these are oil and gas executives. I believe it was headed by a gentleman by Sanderson, and this was like a year and a half ago. I think they started, but yeah, they are executives at oil and gas companies. Probably most of them are millionaires, but they have signed a statement together saying that they are in favor of nuclear and would like to see more nuclear uh, in its various forms, whether it's for process heat for industrial use or for energy like electricity or on ships. Ships have recently, was it IMO, the International Maritime Organization, has had a statement in the past few months where they want to see nuclear ships again for cargo ships. So there's a lot going on, and oil and gas, modern oil and gas, is not necessarily anti-nuclear. That's all I wanted to throw in.
Is that Sandridge? I think.
Sandridge, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah, not Sanderson. Thank you.
yeah, and that's Executives for Nuclear. Interesting project. And I looked up those statistics again, and yeah, it is at least a third of global primary fossil fuel energy goes directly to transit. It is an extremely difficult problem to solve, and there are a number of solutions. But most fantastically, public transit and the integration of public transit and urbanism
Yes,
is a big eco-modernist favored solution or
absolutely.
partial solution.
Walkable cities and public transportation, and
Mm-hmm.
bicycles are part of public transportation, I think. Not necessarily
Yes.
electric bicycles. I'll disagree with you on that, Carl, but I do like bicycles.
I got a question. Yeah. You it's mentioned that you were an author. Could you speak a little bit about your books?
Yes, I actually shared one here, and that's directly related to US. So it's called The Future Civilization, where I describe the vision, and it's quite cheap, and the proceeds are going directly to the work that the US is doing.
Do you have a nightmare scenario that maybe you don't feel the public is ready to hear that you're tempted to write about?
The most realistic type of nightmare scenario, which people very well can experience when we have societal breakdown, is like the film that came out in the United States last year, Civil War, which I actually thought was a pretty good film because it's a realistic image of how war actually tends to look. Not this kind of heroic film where you are following a bunch of heroes. Instead, you're just seeing people that try to survive when when soldiers are trying to make the fighting stop. And you see how the war becomes a self-perpetuating disaster, in fact. So we are already seeing this. You know about Yemen. You know that Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, became the first capital city in the world entirely without groundwater in 2018. It was at least projected to become that in 2018. I do not know any data now because data is very hard to get there. And we see more and more collapsing societies, especially in Sahel and in parts of the Middle East. And a lot of it has to do with water stress. So we are seeing the beginnings of that social collapse phase. And it's like a domino effect, that one domino flips over another domino, and you get worse. And we have had social collapses before, like during the Bronze Age collapse. And I would say that the closest analogy for what we most likely will see during the second half of this century is the Bronze Age collapse, but within an industrialized society. And take that with, for example, drones, drone technology, and mass unemployment. We will have huge incentives for people to join criminal gangs. Militarized drones will be easy to produce. You can use scraps to produce them. So basically, we could see high-scale anarchy and governments turning more authoritarian to curb that, and then we have a process that can't be controlled. So that's my nightmare scenario.
Yeah. We might have a collapse anytime because of the debt bubble as well.
I think that has happened before, but it has happened with smaller countries than the United States. And the most dangerous thing with debt bubbles is that they show really that money is a tool to measure the economy. Money is not the economy. Argentina had such a collapse in 2002. And what happened was basically that the workers of industrial factories broke into the factories and continued to run the factories. The workers in the electric grid broke into the electric grid and continued to run it. And then they traded with the people in the factories for things that they needed. So they created a sort of non-monetary economy just to sustain themselves and survive. So the debt bubble could actually, to a certain degree, be a savior because it forces people to be creative. So it worries me less. What worries me more is that is basically corrupt autocrats and that the oligarchy gets really irrational and wants to derail any processes towards a sustainable society because they just don't want to pay, let's say, 20% higher taxes or something like that.
Wonderful. If there's anything else, I think we're about ready to wrap up our show for today. In that case, thank you everyone for your contributions. This has been the Ecomodernist channel live. You can find us here almost every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific. What would that be? 1 p.m. Eastern. So 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time, US time, on YouTube at Ecomodernist1. That's our channel, at Ecomodernist1 on YouTube or the Ecomodernist channel. Please support us on Patreon. Look for Ecomodernist channel on Patreon. You can find us online at esna.earth. And of course, we rebroadcast several of my personal channels to Soyaddle on Twitch or soyaddle.tv, to my personal x.com account, Carl Alex Pauls, and many other places where content is broadcast. Remember, emissions first, peace and justice will follow.
Please subscribe to us on YouTube, Ecomodernist channel. Also to subscribe to us on Twitter and Facebook, Ecomodernist Society of North America.
And online at https://esna.earth.